So, the first session of the afternoon is Beating Obesity with Hugh Edwards, Public Affairs Director from UK Active, whose Twitter handle or Twitter title says, "I don't read the news." So
I lost as many listeners for that as I did here.
Excellent. So we've also got Shakespeare here as well. So I'm going to get them to start now. But if anyone wants to join in, if anybody wants to join in, please come and join the tent. But this session now is about tackling obesity, a really important point for the health of the nation.
Thank you very much, Dean, and good afternoon to everyone here. As I said, my name is Hugh and this is Jack. We're from UK Active. UK Active is a non-for-profit health organisation representing around 4,000 organisations across the UK with a mission to get more people more active more often. A couple of immediate things to say. Firstly, I make no apologies for Jack's audacious piece of guerrilla marketing, which he's doing right now, which is to celebrate National Fitness Day, which is next Wednesday. Shameless piece of marketing. So there's a big campaign for us. Over 1 million people involved next week on Wednesday, and it'd be great if everybody can get involved and promote that and support that as well. The second thing around this festival, I suppose, is the fact that we've had obviously the levels of discourse already, and we've had the music, but what we haven't had so far is any drugs. And that's one thing which we thought were missing. So Jack and I obviously came well prepared, and we have brought some drugs, maybe to entice some additional people into. But there's plenty of cake, George, as well. But the reason I do make some apologies for that cheap joke, but it comes with a relatively serious message. Because imagine if you went to a pharmacist or a GP and they said to you, here is a treatment which can address 20 conditions which are either avoid, will have an impact on your long-term life, and maybe have an impact on the quality of the life that you have, you know. And actually there is something there, and it's called physical activity, you know, and it's been called a miracle cure by the Academy of Royal Medical Colleges and by Simon Stevens himself. And we have that, and we know the power of physical activity, yet we're now living in an environment, and now living in a society in which the generation being born now is likely to have a life expectancy that is less than ours. And that is because of the impact of inactivity within society. And we know on a day-to-day basis over the next year that there will be the economic cost of inactivity will be £20 billion in this country, and it will lead to 37,000 premature deaths. Now that for us is a national shame. And so what we want to do is give some consideration to how we can actually work with the government and with wider partners and working with UK Active to see how we can change the dial on that and actually produce a prevention over cure approach and actually encourage people to look at the inactivity levels they have and become more active, even if it's a little bit of activity from nothing to something, because the long-term benefits on that will be substantial. Now, for us, we look at this in terms of not just saving the NHS and supporting the long-term sustainability of the NHS. It's more than that. We genuinely believe that the physical activity is this golden thread that runs through everything we do in society, whether it be the ageing population, whether it be mental health, whether it be how people with disabilities have a complete and rewarding life within society, how we look at issues around disconnected communities, isolated individuals, gun crime, youth crime, and also how we build new communities as well. So, you know, this is something which is very important to us. And Jack and I have got a couple of absolutely belting ideas we'd like to share with you, which we think we could really work with you in terms of the big ideas which have been discussed today. One is around children and young people, and the other one is around community assets. And Jack, as our head of UK Active Kids, is going to talk about the first one now, which is around young people.
Thank you, Hugh. Hi guys, my name's Jack Shakespeare. I've got a great job at UK Active, and that's to sort of head up our work around children and young people and ways in which we could try and get them moving more. I feel fantastically underdressed for today, so apologies, but we had to get the logo out there. And I will say it again, next Wednesday, jump around as much as you can for National Fitness Day. We'll be in Westminster on Wednesday doing an active mile, so if anyone's around, then please do join us. There you go, it's just plug after plug. I'm here to, I've sort of gatecrashed it. I piggybacked onto Hugh's presentation because I really wanted to wave the flag for children and young people. They're a voiceless bunch. They don't vote yet, but they will vote. So sort of an incredibly important cohort of people. I'll start with some stats. And I know we're here to talk about obesity, but we'll go broader than that. currently 20% of children entering primary school are overweight or obese, and by the time they leave primary school in year 6, that number has risen to 25%. So a quarter of children going into secondary school, an incredible time to ask children to transition from one nice, comfortable environment to a pretty strong, sort of intimidating environment. Quarter of that cohort are overweight or obese, and obesity is a much more complex issue than the childhood obesity plan suggests. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not the whole picture. It is about in and out. It is about the food we eat and the calories that we burn. I.e. physical activity, but it's much more than that. It's about mental health. It's about family values. It's about peer pressure. It's about culture. It's about sort of behaviours in the local community. The second problem we've got is that, and this is a stat, children that spend more than 80% or 80% or more of their school lives on free school meals, by the time they get to take their GCSEs, they're on average 2 years behind their more affluent peers. So they've got 2 years of lost learning somewhere across their school life. And we're expecting them to be to compete with their more affluent peers around them. 66% of that learning loss is attributed to school holidays. So 66% of that 2-year gap is attributed to school holidays, and this chasm between the experiences that children from more affluent backgrounds have compared to children from low-income families during those school holidays. So that's 6 weeks of disengagement, and we see massive levels of cognitive learning loss. We see massive levels of fitness drops amongst children from low-income families across the holidays. Mental health problems on the rise during holidays. Social care referrals going up during holidays. Antisocial behaviour and arrests going up during holidays amongst this group. Not to mention malnutrition across those holidays. So I guess our call to action is we need to address this, and we need to reshape that experience of those children from low socioeconomic backgrounds during the 6 weeks holidays. There's about £100 million left of the sugary drinks tax this year. Most of it got swallowed up in the PE and school sport premium, but there's about £100 million left, and our call really is to spend that in the areas that really matter, is to spend that on mobilising local networks of support, is to spend that on creating networks and opening local assets so that children from these backgrounds can attend programmes that feed them, that educate them, that keep them active, and importantly, engage them, inspire them so that they literally hit the ground running every new term in September. We've got projects on the ground at the moment, but our call to action to everyone here, and we were fortunate enough to go to 10 Downing Street on Tuesday to stake this claim as well. Our call to action is to spend this money in the right places so that all children can hit that ground running from September.
So that's the first one we've given you. That's a belter, I think, and we're more than happy to come and have a chat with you around this summer holiday piece, because I think it's a clear area. The second one's around community infrastructure and assets, and it was brilliant this morning with the on-site youth zone. We align with them. We've had a number of conversations with them. They're speaking at our UK Active Policy Summit on the 1st of November. Plug, apologies. Thank you, George. Community assets are fundamental. I came through on the tube this morning and got the train from Paddington. I went past Grenfell Tower, and the impact of that, is profound. But also, one story which doesn't really get told enough on that is how the Westway, the community leisure centre, came to the aid of hundreds of families over the days and weeks after that. Communities value their assets and their community leisure and the opportunity for people of all ages to go play, to have recreation, to be social. Now, community leisure in this country has gone into a level of disrepair because of a perfect storm of austerity and also local authorities having less money to spend on community leisure as its non-statutory responsibility. Our chair, Tanya Gray-Thompson, made a pledge last November to say, look, put £1 billion investment into community leisure across the whole country, build new integrated sites which bring together not only sport and gym, but also libraries, GPs, community centres, light onside, police services, and then you have these integrated sites. This is not a conceptual plan. There's already 20 or 30 has already been built by Sport England over the last 5 or 6 years. They work. They're efficiency savings for local authorities, they revenue return, and they have sustained use. The ambition here is to take 20 and 30 and put that to 100, 150, 200 across the country. The question is money, obviously. There is no magic tree, money tree. However, there is a real opportunity to work with the private sector. So I've been working closely with Sport England, and we have secured principled agreement from the private sector through pension funds to invest up to £1 billion into community leisure. So we started having ongoing conversations with the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport on this. But this would have a transformative impact on how the quality of people's assets in their local area, and would be, these are the areas and the things which generally people really value. So to continue those and have the urgency of those conversations would be a really exciting opportunity to work with the current government and other stakeholders to really bring together that plan and put it into fruition, because this would be almost an industrial policy for physical activity over the next 5-10 years. So to conclude from our perspective, we are very passionate, obviously, you can tell, around physical activity and the power it has, this golden thread through society. We're also conscious that it really needs pan-government support. It can't be put in that DCMS box exclusively. It has to have that ownership across all the government. Because ultimately, and the people we meet on a day-to-day basis, whether it be the old people's get-together in Canvey Island in Essex, where they get together and they talk about how they become physically active and walk around the blocks to the point they're no longer on insulin, or Nansen Primary School in Birmingham, which Jack has spent a lot of time with, one of the Trojan Horse schools, which has now turned around their fortunes through dance, culture, sport and physical activity, which is an incredible story, and I would encourage you to go and see that school in action, because it is an amazing thing. So this is something which I think would permeate across all government colours, irrespective of colours, and something which we are really, really excited to be here and talk a bit more about, around how physical activity can play a real important part in the health and activity of our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hugh. I reckon we're going to put the chairs onto the stage now so we can have a bit of a discussion and a Q&A. So while we do that, I just want to say thank you to those of you who came along. I wonder whether obviously coming after the Prime Minister's speech...
Hard act to follow,
It's a hard act to follow, but also you're headlining. But the reason why I say that is that, do you think obesity and the issues around that are taken seriously enough?
It's a really good question, and there's a great anecdote. Well, I hope it might not be a great anecdote. You might not feel it's a great anecdote, but the week before the general election, Sky Sports News did a piece on why sport was not being covered sufficiently during the general election as an issue. And there was a number of vox pops about why it could be important. A lot of individuals and parents saying, well, we want to get our kids active. They don't play enough anymore, so they're always on, as Jack was saying, they're always indoors and on their computer games, etc. And one MP said, well, will remain nameless, said, look, it's very difficult for sport to get a cut through because the big issues around the NHS and ageing population and crime and social care and everything like that. And it's like, sport and physical activity permeates through these. It is not an exclusive solution, but it is a solution. And so it's about championing. And, the sports minister now is fantastic. I think there is common agreement that she is one of the best sports ministers there's been, with a really engaged and active team within DCMS championing this. But she needs the backs of everybody across government to think about this really important golden thread around the physical activity and how it can support DCLG, Home Office. I mean, actually, Dr. Philip Lee's here. There you are, sir. And I came to your round table last week, and it was fantastic. And a great example of a department really embracing the power of sport and physical activity. And we have John McAvoy speaking at our event on the 1st of November. It's a great story there. And look, there are a number of departments doing it. Imagine if all the departments had a physical activity strategy or there was a sign-off process. Great. It would be amazing, design, future housing regeneration, making sure that there is accessible areas for people of all ages to be active and creative within the design of new communities going forward.
That's a great answer. And just going to the people in the room now, are there any questions or comments that you want to make?
Well, firstly, thank you for doing this. Although there's a big crowd in the society tent on youth politics, which is not surprising, I think this issue goes right to the heart of some of the deep philosophical questions about the role of citizen and state, and some of the deep implementation challenges. I was a health minister when we introduced the sugary drinks tax. In fact, I was at the Hay Festival when I announced I thought it was a good idea, and 24 hours later I was slapped down by number 10. Not because they didn't think it was a good idea, just that they hadn't prepared to announce it yet. it goes right to the heart of whose responsibility is it. And there are many people who would say, look, it's a parent's responsibility to bring their child up and not for the state to tell them how to feed them, how to... But equally, I certainly, and I suspect many people, feel that where parents are failing in that responsibility, the state has a duty to try and help. We know that actually it's complex because it's to do with a whole series of poverty issues which don't have a silver bullet. There are head teachers like the amazing woman who introduced the mile.
Wiley. Yeah, you know, the Daily Mile and the Active Mile concept was fantastic.
A Daily Mile doesn't cost any money. It's just culture and leadership. So I suppose the question on my mind is this really about big money government projects? Or is it more about incentivizing locally healthy populations so that local council and people say we'd be absolutely mad not to have a healthy population because look at the long-term effect on our funding. What's the real incentive to get people to take it seriously?
It's a really good question. I think there is a piece around incentivization. So one of the things, for instance, we're talking to the Treasury and HMRC about right now is extending the cycle to work scheme to include gym and home equipment, actually, because not everybody wants to. The success of the cycle work scheme has been great over a long period of time. However, it's not for everyone. So actually, is there a greater use of the taxation system to utilize that? There is a role, I believe, in terms of the role of the state to help facilitate and support local authorities and wider players like our sector in terms of who we represent in terms of the physical activity sector to really fulfill the potential of supporting the most vulnerable and the least active in society. I'll go back to the point, George, around the money. You know, we're in a situation where what we probably need in terms of getting this deal over the line with pension funds is government endorsement. Don't need government money. Don't need government guarantee. Just probably need the ability of the power of government to bring the partners together, the pension funds, the operators, the construction sector, the local authorities, and say, look, let's thrash this out.
So sorry, just to interrupt there, but would you say then a lot of it's all about joined up thinking and a single voice about the same thing?
Yeah, and I think, you know, going to what Jack talked about in terms of summer holidays and young people, you know, there is great work taking place, but it's taking place in silos. And I think summers are, you know, and there are a number of organisations, so many organisations which have a touch point on children's inactivity, right? And yeah, if there is an ability to coordinate, we have identified through Insight that kids come back in September and they've lost 80% of their fitness levels from July, right? In the summer, in the 6 weeks of the summer holidays. Now, we don't really have the precise knowledge about why, but we know there's probably factors around parents working, not being confident about putting their kids in anywhere, the cost of putting them in somewhere. So actually, if we can work with looking at, and you can, I would say, using the money smarter from the soft drinks levy into some of the areas in which there are clearly evident issues around inactivity amongst young people, then that's a very smart use of government resources, but also activating the sector there, which is there to go, right, to come over the hills and support the government on this agenda and the child obesity plan. Is there anything you want to add on that?
So I just want to hand back over to the floor. And could I get two questions together and we'll answer them both?
Brilliant, thank you. I'm interested in that distinction between sport and physical activity. So I'd just be interested in hearing a little bit more from you about, you know, which is right for who. Because I loathed PE at school because I can't catch at all. But I cycle 6 miles each way to school to work every day, and you know, so for me it's physical activity, not sport. And the other, a specific question about girls. You know, there's having been a teenage girl, I know how awful it is to be a teenage girl and how desperately self-conscious they are. We are in a bit of a golden age of women's sport beginning. You know, women's sport is actually on telly now, and the BBC covers our results. Do you think that's helpful, and is that beginning to change anything?
Sure. And in terms of the first question, I think, you know, our position around UK Active is that we're agnostic. We just want people to move, right? We just want people to move. Now, people like sport. Some people like sport, cricket, rugby, football in school, but we know that that's not for everybody. So actually you need to have an inclusive offer within schools around activity. So the Active Mile concept, you know, is anecdotally working in a number of different schools across the country. And, you know, we're keen to work with Number 10 and with the Department for Education and Health to get that strategically rolled out. But you're right, sport falls within the umbrella of physical activity. And I think Tracy Crouch has really defined that very well in Sporting Future, which was, you know, the strategy which was released a couple of years ago. On women and girls, especially for your age, Jack.
I think, well, just to go back onto that point, I think we're, as a country, we're obsessed with the word sport. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You know, it's your legacy is you continue to cycle or you enjoy cycling. That's lucky that you do that. There's a lot of people that probably have a bad experience in school and don't do that. I think two things. One is on the girls or the female participation in physical activity. You know, the levels of the levels in physical literacy or the levels in physical activity of girls and boys when they leave primary school, the disparity is criminal. It's gender mistreatment. We allow girls to leave primary school so much less confident in moving than their boy classmates. We wouldn't allow them to leave. We wouldn't allow boys and girls to leave primary school without disparity in literacy and numeracy, but we allow girls to leave primary school without the want or desire or confidence to move or be physically active. Probably because they had a bad experience in PE, or they've been forced to play sport, or there wasn't a wider extracurricular offer for them, whatever it is. So we need to tackle that. But I think more broadly than that, I think physical activity, and as we venture into this world of physical literacy, a massive job of it and priority is to challenge inequality. We have to make sure that physical activity, whether it's sport, whether it's cycling, whether it's playing frisbee in the park with your mum at the weekend, is accessible for everybody. And until it is accessible for everybody, then we are just going to continue to engage the 22% of children and young people that are already engaged in continuous physical activity.
And is there shifting the conversation very slight towards technology? How much does that have a part? I mean, I look at the announcements for people like for Apple Watch, where they're investing an awful lot of energy into health, heart tracking, daily goals and those sorts of things. Do you see that as something that's only going to be really for the elite? It's going to create that barrier where actually those that can afford the technology get healthier and those that can't don't?
It's a really good question. Alan Mack's here, right? Somewhere. Yeah, he's been a really interesting parliamentarian looking at this agenda, within Westminster. So it's a really good question. In many ways, technology has been a contributing factor to us manufacturing activity out of our daily lives. Yet it can be a really important solution in terms of supporting that. So, our organisation is really interesting because we kind of have this panoramic view of the various different organisations. We have, the biggest sort of fitness and leisure sector operators speaking to us on a daily basis, saying, "What's the next big thing? How do we keep ahead of, innovation and technology to actually embrace and make sure that we're being relevant?" And on the other side, we get, daily phone calls saying, "I've got the next big thing, right? This is in, could be in front of the chief executive of Virgin, right?" And so we're working on something called Active Lab, which actually is an accelerator program which bridges the technology sector with the physical activity sector to come up with ideas. What are the big innovative solutions, which could be around adaptations within existing equipment, or it could be, the visual, the advances around VI in terms of the experience that people have when they're actually being active. That this is a very exciting progress, and the Googles and the are pioneers in terms of where some of the stuff they're looking at in terms of that agenda. And yes, I mean, it's really interesting in seeing how Apple and Google are really becoming at the forefront in terms of a person's personal experience around activity. This is agenda which we are looking to fully embrace. And I know Matt Hancock's really interested in this space as well from his digital ministerial responsibility as well.
Yes, just is this one? Yeah. I'll hold it really close, just like that. Yeah. I just want to know, more or less, what your view or what UK actors you might be on classifying obesity as a disease or a chronic disease, and sort of whether or not that would help, I guess, the medical focus on the condition, and what impact that might have for you as a relatively non-medical organisation. Sorry if that's not.
Yeah, but it's a good question. Whether the categorisation would have an issue around victimisation, potentially. I mean, it's. And there, as Jack mentioned, they're very layered and complex reasons around, where obesity comes from. And when I joined the organisation about 18 months ago, you had the extremes of the debate. You had the nutritional, camp here saying you can never outrun a bad diet, and here about the fact that you can run the marathon if you're obese, right? And actually, the debates we need to move that debate on and actually look at the holistic reasons around why people have. Looking at a healthy, active life, which looks at the importance of diet and portion size and what people are eating, but also making sure you have a balance, and it's really interesting that, that even in the last 6 months or so, I don't think our organisation a couple of years ago, we've been speaking to Jamie Oliver Food Foundation, for example, the organisations and the debate and the respective parties are coming closer and closer together in terms of that conversation about everything in the round.
So, and on the food side of things, so I read something recently, I'll assume it's true because obviously I read it.
Sounds about right.
Was that in a local hospital they'd removed the vending machine because they tried to put healthy food in and no one was buying it, so they got rid of it and put the crisps and snacks back in. And I just wondered how much of a responsibility it is for schools, for universities, for public centres to start putting more opportunity for people to buy healthy food, or is that just the government telling people in the sort of nanny state of forcing people to do something they don't want to?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, we're named in the Child Obesity Plan around how we're going to work with the fitness and leisure sector around vending machines, right? And as part of that is actually what you're seeing from the major operators is a piece of self-regulation. There is self-regulation going on. They are a commercial entity ultimately, but there is regulation going on. There's been some really interesting pilots within the NHS around removing, sugary drinks and putting in water and seeing what that looks like in terms of the revenue return from NHS pilots, which I think is the data, the report is impending in terms of that. We want to be in a situation where our sector is respecting the principles of the food standards which are there, and we are looking to move our sector forward in that. But actually, it's moving there organically as well, recognising that they have a responsibility around positioning of drinks and snacks within the vending machines themselves, when itself is quite an important influence in terms of the eyes, the eyes of especially of young kids who go into the fitness and leisure sector. So we take that responsibility as a sector as well.
Fantastic. I'm just going to hand back over to the audience.
Right. Okay. We've spoken a lot about incentives. However, the obesity is a risk factor in so many diseases, and it costs our publicly funded NHS enormous chunks of money. George spoke about the state having a duty to advise people. Should we actually not be considering the state having the right, as it pays for the treatment, the state having the right to insist that people address their obesity issues before they get treatment if they are being treated for an obesity-caused condition?
It's a very challenging and very interesting question, which I'm going to duck slightly. But how I'm going to answer that is things change through. I worked on 6 years on London 2012, right, and it was an incredible experience. One of the reasons why that project worked really well was fear. Because there was the fear of a date in the diary, 27th of July 2012. And it brought organisations together, cross-government, all these organisations, because of the fear of being exposed on the biggest stage in the world. What we need in this is a burning platform. We need the burning platform moment about what is the impact on obesity and inactivity within society. And for us, everything points to the NHS. How do we maintain and ensure that the NHS, which we love and cherish, is sustainable for years to come? We need to get people not using the NHS in the level which they do now. And part of that is around the prevention agenda. How can we get people, especially the most inactive in society, and also looking at the dietary agenda, looking after themselves in a better way, having the support and guidance, especially from GPs. We did a piece recently with the Royal College of General Practitioners. GPs are not confident about social prescribing and looking at issues around activity because they're not confident about the pathways. That's a clear area we need to improve, because we know from when there has been exercise referrals and there has been some great success there. So there is a number of things we need to do, but ultimately we need to stop people having to go into hospital, into A&Es through the conditions which are significantly avoidable.
So we've got about a minute or so left, so I just want to see whether there's another question in the audience. Yeah, fantastic. And then that'll be the last one, I'm afraid.
I was just wondering if there's anything particularly we can do looking at primary schools, and actually very briefly following on from the gentleman's question, almost bringing my own personal experience. I think there's a deeper question about that. For example, my father was having strokes for a year without us realising, and he became obese during that time. And the doctor refused to put him on anti-stroke medicine because he was obese, and my father then died of catastrophic stroke, which he should never have had if they'd just given the medicine. So I think there is that additional thing of how do we balance, yes, we do need to look after NHS, but people are going to die if we do just don't give them treatment because they become obese.
I'll answer the first bit, and then you can answer the second bit. So from a teaching past. I think primary schools are a great platform, great foundation. We've got a captive audience. Children have to be there, which is which is a good place to influence them. I think certainly from my experience of working on playgrounds, working in the classroom, it's looking at physical activity and education beyond physical education. It's especially in primary schools where it's limited to 2 hours a week, and you barely get that. By the time the year one children are changed, you've got about 17 minutes left to play a game of banana tag, then get off the playground before everyone else rushes out. So I think it's embracing physical activity across the curriculum. It's about looking at active classrooms. It's about making sure that children do have space to run around during lunchtime, making sure there's an inclusive extracurricular offer for children with choice and beyond the sort of mainstream team games that we all probably participated in, whether we liked it or not. So more of a holistic point of view in primary schools and giving a curriculum to teachers that they're confident to deliver, that's activated and will get children up and moving around.
Fantastic. I think we're going to have to round up in a second. I just wanted to... Did you want to add one?
I was just going to say, in that particular situation, I do think it comes down to the support and education that GPs need around this whole agenda, which is glaring and evident from the research that we've had about their lack of confidence in this space.
Thank you so much. I just want to, first of all, say thank you for a great debate. I know we didn't necessarily have the quantity, but we definitely had the quality.
High quality audience. Thank you for
please,
sticking with
give
us.
A round of applause
see you at the bar.
to you all. So thank you very much.